welcome to Let's Talk Diz, a show that gives you everything you need to know to help make your Disney vacation as magical as can be in just about 20 minutes. I'm your host, Jeff Coviello. With me each week is Disney Master Sandy from Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services. Sandy, how are you this week?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I am doing great. I am excited to talk to you this week, because we spend a lot of time going in and out of Disney World. And one of the things that you kind of take for granted is that you always are able to refer to people that are making your experience magical by their name, right? Their first name. And so we've come to know that as the expectation in Disney because they have that name tag that you can easily identify who they are. But there's an origin behind it, and it's not as simple as maybe you would think. And so tonight we're going to talk all about the history of the name tags.
That's correct, Mr. Capiella.
Thank you.
But no, you would never find a Disney name tag that is anything but a first name, because even Walt himself wore one that said Walt. The idea that everybody is equal and everybody goes by first name.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's unique, right? I mean, the people have copied it left and right since, but it has its origins there.
We do see it in a lot of different theme parks, and how we can kind of trace the history of how Disney evolved with their name tag and still continues. It's one of the unique things when you talk about those Disney differences, the little things that probably nobody would notice if it never happened again, but you notice because it does continue to happen, how the name tags evolve to fit in with a new theme that they're having for the year or 18 months, or a new land that opened. They really work to make that an all-inclusive idea.
Well, and they've had them for very specific things too, right? It's not just they're not just one and done, right? They've kind of varied throughout the years.
They have, and I will say, you used to be able to buy them yourself as a guest, kind of knockoff versions, and I haven't seen those available for a while. I also, as my nostalgia comes back, you've all heard me talk about my love of the Dining with the Imagineer program that sadly we have not seen return since COVID.
Right.
But when you did that program, part of the program was leaving with a Dining with an Imagineer specialty name tag. So
And you have how many of those? Just out of my
just a
curiosity.
few, just a few.
One or two. One or two. All
But
right.
it was the idea that names mattered,
Right.
people mattered. You should know who you were dealing with, whether you want to give a compliment or a complaint. And again, like I mentioned, that we're all equal. Nobody gets called Mr. or Mrs. Everybody, whether you're the janitor or the CEO, you go by your first name.
So let's talk a little bit about the designs, right? Give us a little bit of the history and the designs, I guess by era or by specific celebration.
You bet. I think they were trying to be a little different than the standard rectangle name tags you found, every realtor and supermarket cashier and every place had. And so they started with a white oval with a little red outline on the oval and that first name. They were pretty plain. We still see those on property now,
Hmm.
but here's your little insider tip. When you see the ones that look like that today, those people are what we call third-party vendors. So you might see them in a restaurant in a park that is not operated by Disney, where they lease the space, but you're not really supposed to know it isn't Disney cast there. You're still room charging, and it's going to come up on your receipt as Disney, and you can pick those name tags out. So they started with just that little unique kind of off-white oval with that red rim.
Sure.
Then it became the bicentennial, and everybody celebrated back in 1975, 1976. They did a little over a year of a special bicentennial tag, and that had the kind of waving flag logo and the words bicentennial with it, because that was important. We've talked in past shows about Walt's patriotism and his love and respect for our country and our military. And so it makes perfect sense that that was the thing that really caused them to make a change was the bicentennial.
Definitely. All right, cool. But that's not the only time. Obviously, it's evolved many
It
times since
evolves
then. Yeah.
over and over, but that bicentennial tag was still just an oval. It took till 1986 till they changed the tags to the shape that we see today. And again, I think some of that is there was a lot of copying in different parts of the industry, and their tags were unique shape. They keep that oval, but they kind of have a little bump near the top, and they use that spot to do some type of logo. And at the time, that first one that had it was the 15th anniversary of Walt Disney World, and that's how they honored that new tag.
Hmm.
They changed that tag up again 5 years later to honor the 20th anniversary. And it's funny, I've done name tags, I've noticed name tags for a long time. We actually, funny little aside story for you. My daughter's bat mitzvah, I'm sure this is shocking to everybody, was Disney themed.
Yes, shock and awe by the audience right now.
And we went on eBay at the time and we purchased clearly somebody, you know, cleaned out an empty house or a storage unit that college students used to live in. And we purchased a bag of miscellaneous Disney name tags.
Mm.
And every waiter at the catering place got to pick a name that they were going to be for the night. Every waiter wore some name that wasn't theirs,
That's
but
funny.
they all had on that famous Disney tag.
That's very funny. So,
Um,
so you've mentioned the bicentennial tag, the 15 years of magic in Walt Disney World, and then the 20th anniversary. But there's also something on some of these tags that I think is worth mentioning, and it gives us an idea of telling them where they're from.
and that's why I mentioned that I had to do a little digging on the history because if you had asked me, I always take notice along the bottom, you will see a hometown, or for many of our college program students, what college they're at. They don't have
Correct.
to give their hometown.
Yep.
And I would have thought that was from the beginning, but that didn't come until 1984. But for us, that's a conversation starter. And I think it's one of the reasons it was added. You know, we do take note whether we see somebody from my hometown, or sometimes something will happen and I'll be joking with a boat captain or somebody on the monorail station, and I'll say, well, it's because I'm a Jersey girl like you. That's why it's okay that's happening.
Oh yeah.
And they kind of laugh, and we get into a discussion of what part of New Jersey they're from. You know, if they're way south, like Cape May, I tell them that's not really my state. New
Right.
Jersey isn't as long as people claim. But it's great to make that connection. I also think for people who are traveling with teenagers and, young 20 somethings to see all the different colleges and opportunities to talk to people. I remember when my daughter was looking at going to college, we did talk to random cast members. Maybe it was a waitress, maybe it was somebody checking us in. We certainly didn't go scouring the park wondering, is there anybody here from Muhlenberg College? But, if we saw them, we made that connection. And now, shout out Muhlenberg. I do when I see the Muhlenberg kids on CP program, I go and I talk to them and I tell them, my daughter went there and she had lots of friends, and how are you liking it here? And how do you like Muhlenberg? Again, Walt was about people and making connections. So that name tag does so much more. And initially, most of those tags had either a Mickey head, those three circles, or the classic, what they call the ta-da Mickey. Mickey kind of standing up with his arms spread wide. But when we got into the late 80s, they really started to customize them a bit. We saw that top design change over to location for a little bit.
Hmm.
Wide World of Sports got their own logo design. Pleasure Island, Kangaloosh got their own design.
Sure.
It really also told people where they were at and kind of, again, added to that theming.
In the 80s, we're right in the middle of Michael Eisner right there too. So
And it was the perfect segue right into the 100 Years of Magic tags. the year 2000, the millennium tags.
Hmm.
And then they started to mix it up a little bit. I was sad one time when I went to the park and the hometowns were gone and they were replaced with favorite characters.
Mm.
Everybody named their favorite character. But again, it created a lot of great connections. And even if I didn't have them, I'm a big observer in the park. And so you can watch people, young kids pointing and reading and, I love Thumper. She's my favorite. And how we make those connections.
Well, I do think, and I was going to mention this when you were talking about the hometowns, but it makes sense with what you just said there too. That's really why the name tags are so interesting and unique and fun for me, is that there are plenty of conversations that I've had with cast members simply because of the name tag, right? So I encourage anybody, if that's not what you've done, I know sometimes, and we're guilty of it in the Northeast here, of not necessarily being accused of being overly friendly people. I will say that's definitely something that we wear. But I think on a vacation, especially a Disney vacation, it's a really great opportunity to speak really openly, honestly, and in a fun way with the people that are helping make your dreams come true. So I encourage you to speak to everybody that you see, especially if you have a connection with a hometown, or in the case you just said there, obviously, when you did see the favorite character.
Definitely. And I'll also add, especially in Epcot, that's where you see the most people on the international program. It can be a great conversation piece if you're a regular traveler and you happen to be in Epcot and maybe you're going to that country and you want a little tip, or you went to a country and you loved it. I actually, last summer, I was in the Norway pavilion a couple of weeks before I did my Adventures by Disney Norway. And I went into the gift shop and I kind of sized up all the people working, decided who would deem me the least crazy person there.
Right.
And I went over to this nice young woman. I said, "Hey, I've got a really strange question for you. I'm going to Norway in 2 weeks with Adventures by Disney. What would be a cool thing that you have don't have in Norway that we have in the US that you think I should bring as a gift?" And this girl rattled things off like crazy. I thought she was going to think I was losing my mind, but she's
Right.
like, "No, we talk, if you're dealing with an adventure guide, they're going to know a lot of people who have been CPs, and we're always asked to bring back this kind of candy and that kind of candy and this chocolate." And she named a lot of things. And so I remember
That's
thinking
cool.
some of them were odd. The big thing that she told me was like the most popular thing to bring back is the various non-original flavors of Oreo.
All the
And
new crazy
all
ones.
the new really wacky
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
flavors. And so I gave my adventure guide, in addition to their cash gratuity, this gift bag filled with American treats. And I prefaced it by telling her the story I just told you. And I said, "I hope you enjoy it and you don't think it's as crazy as my daughter thought it was when I told her I was doing it." And
Yeah,
she's like, "No, we all love the American things like this." And it's funny what they can and can't get. And even
sure.
companies that make candy in all these different countries I've been to, some of the things you'll find pretty much anywhere, but they're not even the same recipe. Kind of like a Coca-Cola, you might find M&Ms around the world, but they all seem a little bit different. So definitely make some extra friends in Epcot.
Yeah.
Notice as you're going throughout the diversity in Disney. It's not just the international people you're going to find in Epcot. You're going to find people from all over, being all over. And listen, I think they know, we talk about how Disney is created as a stage. They're all working
Right.
on a stage and they are on stage. And so they do expect interactions. And sometimes I'll look and I'll say to somebody, "How did you end up going from this little town in Alaska and deciding to move to Orlando?" Because they're a waitress somewhere, and they're not there as a college program kid. This is where they now are. And just the interesting stories you can get from people, or not even international destinations, US destinations you might be going to where somebody lived. It's a great way to get some of that real flavor. And they love talking. That's why they have on-stage jobs, not backstage jobs.
So, what other noticeable changes, though, can we point to over the course of obviously the parks with the name tags?
I think one of the most unique that I saw on both coasts was when they opened Batu. Not only was the tag a different color and that different icon on top,
Right.
but it was written in another language,
Right.
something we certainly don't see here.
Sure.
And that's a perfect tie-in to something else that you might notice on a name tag. All name tags have the ability for a little add-on plaque that is the country of a language that somebody speaks, or in some cases, two hands to indicate that they speak sign language.
Right.
And no, you cannot just say, I speak Spanish or I know how to do sign language. It's a rigorous test that you must pass in order to get that language add-on, because they want to know that you know enough to be able to actually hold a conversation and
Sure.
help a guest, and aren't going to have the wrong pronunciation to call somebody, a behind instead of a piece of bread.
Right. Of course.
Because somehow I don't get those languages that have those minor nuances with words that are so different. But if you see those tags on there, definitely take advantage. I have one client who says to me, we go looking for them so my kids can practice Portuguese.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that.
So, think about it. I've talked before, especially in Epcot at the KidCot stations, ask them how to say, pick a word that anytime you see somebody with a tag that isn't in English, you're going to ask them how to say soccer or ballet or whatever your child's favorite thing is, to learn it in all those different languages that you come across.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else? What else?
So we will see two other types of name tags. One is the Disney security. Theirs looks more like a police badge, but they do still get a name badge as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then our guest services and tour guides have that big classic D pin that was a Lillian Disney creation that lives on to this day. And this, we have to remember, when we were getting our learner's permit and learning how to drive, many places have a magnet you can put on the back of your car that says student driver to alert the rest of the world to be very careful.
Sure.
Disney follows that same theory. Hanging down from some name badges, you may notice a red ribbon. And on that ribbon, it says, earning my ears.
Mm-hmm.
And the earning my ears comes in two different ways. It can come because you are brand new to Disney and you're learning everything that there is. Or it can come because you've taken a new role in the company. Maybe you've been working front desk at Boardwalk for 2 years, but now you move over to Animal Kingdom Lodge. You may know how to use the computer and the basics of a check-in, but you can't answer all of the questions. Maybe you don't know what all the room views are. You don't know exactly where the quick service location is. You're learning those things and you may know most of them, but it's kind of the sign that they're learning, and hopefully it signals anybody who sees them to have a little bit more patience.
Definitely.
Now,
Well,
I'm going to give you one last insider tip on name badges.
okay.
And these are actually name badges that you're never going to see, but I think this is very cool.
All right.
So out in the parks and in the resorts, your name is your name. There could be 20 people named Jeff.
Right.
And they work all over. Maybe there's even 2 Jeffs that work in Boardwalk. But when you are dealing with the call centers, so that Disney number that you're calling if you're not using a travel agent, or the Disney Cruise Line, they have what we call stage names.
Mm.
Because if there's ever an issue, there can only be one person named Jeff in reservations.
Right. Otherwise, you're chasing it around.
You're chasing it around. So those people get stage names, and sometimes their stage names change. I was on the phone the other day with Adventures by Disney, and I'm talking to this guy, and I'm thinking to myself, he's got a doppelganger out there. He has a distinctive voice, and I know that voice, and I know the name that goes with the voice, but he works at Disney Cruise Line. And finally, about 8 minutes into the discussion, I must have been hesitating more than I normally do. And he said to me, "Hey, San." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You know who I am, right?" And it was because he switched from one area to another.
Right.
But it's interesting how they get those names so that they are unique.
That's funny. Well,
Now, we have one last bit that I think we're going to talk about tonight.
yeah, I was going to ask you. So, you walk around and you see that there are cast members all over that are wearing a blue name tag, right? So that's a departure from what we were talking about. Talk to me a little bit about what that is and why it's important.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you for a minute and say it's not all over. The white name tag is the standard. Less than 1% of cast members in the world are wearing that blue name tag.
Right.
And if you see that blue name tag, again, strike up a conversation with them.
Sure.
It does not mean that they are the spiffiest person and 6 people in line down to be CEO of Walt Disney. That's not what that means.
No, some of them wish it was, but that's not the case.
It is a legacy award. And the legacy means that they embody the 3 pillars that Walt believed in strongest: dream, create, and inspire. That blue name tag is not annually. There are nominations taken by coworkers, team leaders, and if a person has received substantial #cast compliments through Twitter, they can also receive a nomination. Based on nominations, a committee then goes out to find out more about these people. And when the nominations are written, it's, why is Jeff worthy of being a legacy? What can you tell me about him? How does he help our guest experience? How does he help morale? What does he do for team culture? And as I said, less than 1% of people receive this award. They do not accept everybody that is nominated each year. To receive a legacy tag is a big deal.
Yeah.
But again, it's about the person. You will find legacy people in every Disney community, from parks to ships, and you will find them in every role. It could be a cashier at a fast food location. It could be a housekeeper. It could be janitorial staff. It could be a boat driver, a team lead, an attractions person. It's about, do they dream, create, and inspire? And do they enhance the guest and the team experience? So those people are the cream of the crop in Disney. I have many friends that have received them. And to them, it is their Tony, their Grammy. They take that award and receiving it extremely serious. But it does mean you've got somebody who imbibes the Walt personality. And they are what helps make the magic.
Well, I think that's it, right? And so when we had talked about doing it, it was really like, let's acknowledge the fact that the very reason we're able to have these conversations with people is because all the way back to Walt's vision is that everybody should be first name basis, right? So next time you're walking around a park, next time you're on a cruise ship, next time you're anywhere where there's a Disney name tag, don't forget to look at it. And you might just find somebody from your hometown or your home state or just some place that sounds like it's a good time. and it might lead you to a conversation. You might even start to bring stuff abroad the next time you go abroad, as you just so eloquently put out. So I thank you, Sandy, for taking the time tonight to dig and to find a little bit of research on the history of the name tags. I thought it was fun. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks. It was a good night.
Have a great week.
You too.
That's a wrap this week on Let's Talk Diz. If anyone you know could benefit from this or any show, please share, have them like, and subscribe. And don't forget to reach out to the folks at Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services for any Disney destination planning. Make it a great week. And as always, keep making memories.